Hi, I'm Chris Overstreet, and I have opinions. It's been a hot minute since I last recorded one of these, if you don't count yesterday. Yesterday, when this microphone wasn't actually picking anything up. So, before we get into what I actually want to talk about today, let's get a review of exactly where we're at this point in time. Right now, we have a president who openly solicits bribes to the tune of billions of dollars through gifts in kind, direct payments, or purchases of crypto coin. This same president extorts payoffs from corporations that have business with the American government of one kind or another, and he uses the White House and his office to personally sell merchandise for his own personal gain. We have a president who attempts to control major legal firms and major institutes of higher education in this country through coercion, threatening to withhold funding or to crack down or make it impossible for them to operate unless they obey his every whim. We have a president who, with the assistance of half a dozen billionaires, is consolidating the entire mass media into his personal control, to the point where he even is able to declare that this, that, or the other person should be fired from their jobs. We have a president who levies taxes on the American people without any action of Congress. We have a president who then ignores congressional appropriations, either withholding the spending of funds for programs Congress has authorized or transferring those funds to other projects which he wishes to see go forward. We have a president who has taken direct control of agencies which were specifically designed by Congress to be apolitical, nonpartisan, and independent, so that they would uphold the law rather than follow the whim of a single individual. We have a president who is firing public servants to the numbers of hundreds of thousands so he can replace them with people who are sworn to be personally loyal to him and him alone. We have a president who is demanding the resegregation of American society, both in education and in business, and who is making steps to extend this segregation to the United States military. We have a president who claims to have the power to imprison people without charges or evidence presented, who claims the power to order the death of people without any evidence to anybody whatsoever, strictly on his own say-so. We have a president who is actively sending people to death prisons in other countries, in dictatorships, without any evidence, without any process of law, without any possibility of appeal. And to expedite this process, he is building concentration camps here in the United States, in which thousands of people have already vanished without record or ability to trace them. And most recently, just a couple of days ago, we have a president who has declared that anyone who disagrees with his positions is a domestic terrorist, and he's declared his intent to use the United States military to wage war on American citizens. And through all this, we have a Supreme Court who thus far, in 18 out of 20 cases presented to them, have ruled in his favor to give him all this power. And we have a Republican-controlled Congress who has not lifted a finger to stop him, and in several cases has been complicit in all these activities. If 10 years ago you had said that any one of these things was going to be taken for granted as a thing which happens, a thing which can't be stopped, people would have laughed at you. Oh, it can never happen here. No, no, no. There's all sorts of guardrails to protect us. The system is robust. It will hold up. It hasn't. But despite the fact that we are almost indisputably now living in an American dictatorship, there are still a few bright spots of hope. They're not big bright spots. We're still in a very dark place right now, but there are a couple of reasons to hope. And for the first one, we'll go back to last Tuesday, 2 days ago as I record this, when, for reasons strictly focused on personal vanity, Secretary of the Defense, I refuse to say Secretary of War because Congress has not authorized that name, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth called in every general and admiral in the United States military, over 800 people, every commander, into one place, which by itself is incredibly stupid. It's begging for a decapitation strike if somebody was inclined to do so. And then Donald Trump said, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'll be part of that too." When this was announced, I admit I was wrong, because I absolutely expected that this would be the point at which the personal loyalty oath would be taken, as with Hitler in 1933, followed up by purges of anybody in the military who did not swear personal loyalty to Donald Trump. That's what I expected. And to a certain extent, I still expect that to be attempted. But no, I managed to underestimate the stupidity of Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. They called these commanders together at great expense, at great risk to our national security, simply so they could have a press opportunity, so they could have a rally, so they could look good on camera. And it was during this that Donald Trump started talking about the enemy within, and how he was going to have the military go into Chicago and New York and Los Angeles and other places to go after domestic enemies, which the officers of the United States military are sworn to oppose. This kind of talk by itself ought to be impeachable. And if impeachment actually worked, it would be. It doesn't. Anytime a leader talks about the enemy within, that is a fascist. That is straight up, unadulterated, unmistakable fascist propaganda. And that was what got spewed by Donald Trump. And then Pete Hegseth followed it up by calling for an end to the military rules of engagement. Basically saying torture's okay, war crimes are okay, our soldiers should shoot first and ask questions never. All to uphold the warrior ethos. He also called for a bunch of personal standards, including fitness but also appearance, which would have the effect of eliminating women and black people from the United States military, but I'll speak more about that another time. But despite all this, this event had one bright spot to it, and it is this. At the beginning of his words, Donald Trump called on the men, the generals and admirals in attendance, to applaud and cheer if they wanted to. He went on to say, "Oh, and if you don't like it, well, there's the door, but you'll lose your career, you'll lose your position. Whatever." But the important thing is he gave them a direct order that if they wanted to, they could cheer and applaud. They could break military decorum. He wanted them to break military decorum to show their approval of his words. And in 90 minutes of bloviating by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, they remained absolutely silent, except for a few random, inappropriate chuckles. None of them cheered. None of them applauded. None of them gave the slightest hint of approval. And this was every single officer in the military ranking rear admiral or brigadier general or higher. Every last one. Think about that for a moment. We know from polling that roughly 40% of the officer corps supported Donald Trump in the last election, and close to 60% of the enlisted, mind you. We'll come back to that detail in a moment. And yet not a single one of these generals and admirals cheered anything either of these men said. They sat there in stone cold silence while both Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth had their applause pauses and heard nothing. Right now, you should be breathing a little bit easier, because what this means is, although if he tries hard enough, he will eventually find people who are willing to carry out his orders for the military to commit atrocities on American soil, he hasn't got there yet. These men are not openly saying no to Donald Trump, but they are quite emphatically not saying yes. Again, this is a small bit of hope. And I feel the need to curb this because there are some among you who might be thinking that after hearing Donald Trump basically say he's going to use the military to attack his enemies and kill hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of Americans for the crime of insufficiently worshiping Donald Trump. Yeah, Donald Trump, if he fires enough people, will eventually find somebody to carry out those orders for him. But he hasn't got there yet. But the fact that he proposed this at all in any sane world would mark him down immediately as one of the domestic enemies of America that Donald Trump himself was referring to. Donald Trump is one of those people that the generals and admirals are sworn to oppose. And some of you are thinking, well, that's great. That means we get a coup d'etat, we get the Republicans out, and everything will be hunky-dory. No. Granted, if any of those generals and admirals was thinking about it and kind of on the fence, that would have pushed them over. But it's not going to happen. And here's the reasons why. First off, such an effort would almost certainly fail and make things much, much, much worse. Why? Because Trump's FBI and Trump's CIA are almost certainly monitoring every last one of these people, looking at their communications. In fact, looking at millions of communications using AI and other methods. Probably at some point, one of those programs is going to look at this video and say, well, is this person talking about recommending a coup against Donald Trump? No, I'm not. It's a bad idea. But my point is, those generals and admirals will be looking at this and thinking, okay, I can't organize this any place online, and I don't know who I can trust among my fellow officers. Will this person go along with it? Will they spontaneously join me if I pick this thing off? Or will they order their forces to oppose mine and we'll have a civil war over it? Or more likely, my own troops, who remember, 60% supported Trump. Active duty troops. My own troops will refuse to obey my orders and they'll take me down and that'll be the end of it. That's one reason. Another reason is, let's say it succeeds. Let's say that Donald Trump is, and also J.D. Vance, the Republicans in Congress, most of the Republican governors, let's say you get a couple, 300 people, the entire Republican national leadership, all bundled up, put in Fort Leavenworth, job's a good one. The military is now in control of the United States. Congratulations. Now, how do you get down from there? Bear in mind that in most military coups, the military has no interest whatever in giving power back to civilian authority. In fact, usually when a military coup happens, it's because a member of the military wants to be the big boss. There have, however, been various exceptions. For example, the military in Turkey actively rose up against leaders who were openly Muslim fanatics and deliberately restored democracy to Turkey. It failed the last time they attempted that against Erdogan, which is why he is effectively a dictator there. They have the trappings of a democracy, but not the substance. There are a couple of other examples. Thailand comes to mind, has had a couple of coups where the military stepped in to restore democracy from one source or another. But the thing is, once a military has taken power, that means the old system, the old Constitution, is kaput. And then if they say, okay, we're going to set things up so that we can let go of power and have proper elections again, bear in mind that all the people who supported the regime they overthrew in the first place are still there, ready to vote. It is entirely possible that if the military did choose to overthrow Donald Trump and succeed, and then try to hand power back to the Democrats, in the very first election, the Republicans and their allies, angry as hell at having their power overthrown, would rush to the polls, and we'd be right back where we started. And then what happens to all those generals who are part of the coup? They either have a choice of saying, well, those elections didn't really count, we're staying in power, or they say, democracy is important, the people have spoken, and they'll walk to the firing squad. Yeah, that's going to be on the mind of any general or admiral who is even remotely considering overthrowing Donald Trump. And that is why it's not going to happen. The United States military is not going to bail us out, because the cure would be worse than the disease, even if it succeeds. But at the very least, they are not, at this moment in time, siding with Trump. Now, that doesn't say anything about the National Guard, who weren't part of this. And we already know that the Red State National Guard is entirely on board with his program. Well, at least until they actually have to be part of it, and then they find themselves picking up trash in Washington, D.C. parks. Then, not so much. But at the very least, we are not going to see a Tiananmen Square event in Los Angeles yet. Another bit of good news, not a huge amount, but another bit, is the case of Jimmy Kimmel. You might remember that I said that Donald Trump has basically seized control of the mass media of America to the point where he can actually fire people indirectly by threatening the companies in question. And of course, various companies, like for example, right now CBS, Paramount, is owned by the Ellisons, father and son, both of whom hard far-right wingers. The New York Times is owned by a right-winger. Rupert Murdoch owns the Wall Street Journal and Fox News. NBC is controlled by right-wing leaning people. And CNN is going up for sale as part of the Time Warner cable conglomerate, which is being sold off of Discovery Time Warner and being spun off so they can get rid of what they consider dead weight. And the Ellisons are about to buy that. So yeah, it is intensely concentrated in the hands of Trump supporters right now. But as we found out, not totally so. Right after the killing of Charlie Kirk, and I'll have more to say about that in a separate video, Jimmy Kimmel on his show made remarks to the effect that the Republican Party were going to use Kirk's death as a cudgel to ram through their own agenda, making him their martyr. Donald Trump's reaction was to get his head of the his person in charge of determining who gets to broadcast things, Federal Communications Commission chair, said, you go there and tell him, I want Kimmel fired, or else ABC loses some licenses. ABC backed down and suspended Jimmy Kimmel. And America, for the first time since Donald Trump returned to power, actually united as one. Well, almost one. $4 billion Disney lost, Disney owning ABC, by the way, in less than a week because people were pissed that they bent the knee to Donald Trump. And a week after he was suspended, Kimmel was back on the air ragging the Republicans, ragging Donald Trump once again. Now, the two biggest conglomerates owning ABC affiliate stations, Nexstar and Sinclair Media, they still kept Kimmel off the air for a few days. But ABC applied huge financial pressure to them, basically saying, put Kimmel back or lose your sports, lose your affiliation, lose what keeps you open. Sinclair and Nexstar backed down, despite the fact that both corporations are run by CEOs who love Donald Trump. What does this mean? It means that whether or not Republicans can be persuaded, and I don't believe they will, I'll make another video about that down the road possibly, corporations can, if you effectively go after their bottom line. ABC was threatened with worse consequences for bending the knee to Donald Trump than they faced by standing up to him. Now, make no mistake, ABC would have preferred to stay out of it entirely, but Donald Trump will not allow people to be neutral. He demands total and absolute worship of the ground he walks on. But ABC was hemorrhaging money, and they backed down. Now, there are, especially privately owned corporations, where this will not necessarily work because, for example, there were boycotts of what was Twitter, boycotting the people who are buying ads on Twitter. And you'll notice Twitter's still around 3 years after the Muskrat bought it. That's because Elon Musk doesn't care if Twitter or X or whatever he wants to call it makes a dime. He bought it specifically to make it his own echo chamber, his own propaganda mill. And he doesn't care what anybody else has to say about that. So that business is not touchable, not persuadable. But some businesses can be persuaded to oppose Trump if the backlash is strong enough, united enough, and does not stop at letters or protests, but goes straight for their wallets. So, a little bit of hope. Now, we are still, as I said before, in a very, very dark place. And there is one thing in particular that both of these little specks of hope illuminate, and that's the fact that Donald Trump does not yet have absolute power. He's not that far from getting it, but he hasn't got it yet. And while he doesn't have it yet, it is still possible to stop him. And the way you stop him is by not complying in advance. Right now, Harvard University is still holding out, still trying to avoid having Donald Trump take over their university the way he's taken over several others. Right now, various legal practices have rejected Donald Trump's attempts to coerce them. And just now, ABC have rejected Donald Trump's attempt to dictate what they will broadcast and when. And Donald Trump can't do much about that. Dictators mainly gain power through people cooperating in advance, through voluntary compliance to the dictator. And if enough people do that, then the compliance will no longer be voluntary. Which is why people say, do not comply. Resist. You'll notice those 800 generals and admirals. They did not say no out loud, but they also have not resigned their commissions. They are staying in office, and from all appearances, they are going to make Trump fire them. And until Trump gets around to firing them, they are preventing somebody more compliant with Trump from taking those positions. They're the grit and the gears. They are slowing down the slide into dictatorship. They are resisting. And to you also, I call on you to resist. I'll have more to say in the future, but in the meantime, I'm Chris Overstreet, and I have opinions.